In today's episode, I have the privilege of sitting down with my friend Trevor Ragan. Now, Trevor is the owner of the Learner Lab, where he does a deep dive into the science of learning and it really helps people at getting better. Really excited by this conversation as Trevor and I really dive into the science of learning. We talk about deliberate practice. We talk about his ideas of jungle tiger versus zoo tiger. We talk about how we can be better teachers as coaches and set the best environment for our kids. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with my friend, Trevor Ragan. Trevor Ragan, welcome to the Being Champions podcast, my man.
Thank you. I'm excited for this one.
Hey, Trev, we connected. This is 4 years ago,
Yep.
and within those 4 years, man. First of all, I got to give you a shout out. It's the 12th year of your business, man. 12th year
hmm
birth. You just celebrated a big birthday a month ago. You put together an incredible 2-hour Zoom session. I remember there's like over 200 people on it. And it's very rare to see all those people in 2 hours and then no one logged off. I think more people
Yeah.
jumped on.
Yeah.
So it's just a testament, man, of how you deliver your content. You
Yep.
have been one of my favorite people to learn from. You just make it simple, right? And you have
Yep.
that phrase of like, how can we get better at getting better? So when I was
Yeah.
forming this podcast and we're thinking of guests, like I think I starred your name 3 times, underlined it, circled it. So I'm just so glad you're here. I feel privileged to have a chance to sit down and learn from you again. But I wanted you to share a little bit about your background. How did this go from Train Ugly to the Learner Lab? Like, how did your business come about? So share with our listeners
Yeah.
how this all happened.
So I think regardless of what the name is, the core idea is kind of the same. So when I first started this, it was mostly basketball focused. So I would do basketball camps during the summer and during the what I called the off season, which is like the other 8 months, I had a bunch of free time. And so I would just start reading and digging through research. I would go hit the road and interview researchers and like interview coaches. And I just started a little blog.
Yeah.
And it was basically like, hey, I'm gonna go learn a bunch of stuff over these 8 months, and whoever wants to follow me can. And every week I'm gonna try to post something. And then that blog started to pick up some momentum. And obviously all the stuff that I was learning helped me create better basketball camps. But after a couple of years of that, I was like, hold on, all this stuff is bigger than basketball. Like all this
Yeah.
stuff can help in really any sport. So pivot number one was this is bigger than basketball.
Yeah.
But then after a couple of years of that, it was, wait, this is bigger than sports. This is learning. And so when we shifted from Train Ugly was a good name for like sports
Yeah.
to Learner Lab, it's like, hey, this is learning in general. Like anyone can use these topics and tools to get better at learning, and getting better at learning will benefit any person. So it doesn't matter if you play sports or you work in the corporate world or like I said, it doesn't matter who you are or what you do. If you're better at learning, that's going to be a good idea. And so it's been a really fun journey. I think it's like the coolest job ever, just getting to learn stuff and then getting to teach it. And I love coming up with like the best ways of explaining complicated science.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot because just as well as I do, like a lot of this science has been around for a long time.
Mhm.
And our job is we want more people using it. Well, if they don't understand it, they're not going to use it. And so we need to explain it in a way that people get it.
Yeah, 100%. And as I hear you talk about, again, why I was so drawn to you is because you do simplify it, man, and you put it in ways that we can all understand it, apply it, and use it.
hmm
So one of my favorite equations that you use, Trevor, is this whole concept of mindset plus environment equals
hmm
behaviors. And the reason I
hmm
love it is I see a lot of coaches, they struggle with their practice plans and they think,
hmm
coach, I had a great practice Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Everyone looked great. But then
hmm
Friday night comes along, we go into our game situation and all of a sudden our kids can't make the right decisions. They're making mistakes, or they don't look like the way they looked in practice. So I wanted you to talk
Hmm.
to us about this whole concept. I know you've actually had the chance to sit down and talk to Anders Ericsson and his
Hmm.
whole idea about deliberate practice. And I know you have a really cool metaphor about how to explain your practice environment. How do we actually
Yep.
get our kids away from practicing the practice to
Hmm.
perform?
Perfect. So I like that you started with that equation, and that's kind of an older blog post, but sometimes I forget about it, but I think it's actually really good. So mindset plus environment equals like change or behavior. And I think where a lot of us go wrong is we want to change a behavior with the people we lead,
Mhm.
whether that's athletes or students or people in the workplace. And the typical approach is we're like, hey, here's the behavior I want you to do. You should go do it.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
fill in the blank with any behavior, whether it's resilience, grit, learning, agility, whatever. It's something you want them to do in practice. So, it's sort of saying, here's a thing, go do the thing.
Yeah.
You need to eat more vegetables. Go eat more vegetables. That's here's the behavior, do it. And then what we're arguing with the equation is if you actually want to create a behavior change, it's not just about telling someone to do a thing. You need to go deeper and one, create an environment that encourages that behavior, that helps them like do the thing. And two, you need to develop mindset tools that helps them like actually build the skills to achieve that behavior. So it's I always try to go deeper than simply asking someone just to do a thing. And
Yeah.
so I kind of like how you teed it up with that. And then we can talk about, all right, here's some things you can do in the environment. Here's some things you can do with mindset. And when you combine those, now we're in kind of a better place for the behavior. The way I think about it is sort of like that combo of mindsets and environment. That's like the soil. We want the soil to be really good soil. Then the seeds you plant, the behaviors we want are going to grow better. And
Yeah.
so I think, again, it's just about creating a good foundation.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about environment first. So you think
Yep.
about the world of sports, right? It's unpredictable. There's so
Hmm.
much uncertainty, there's discomfort. But again, a lot of times I feel like we don't practice that way. We keep
Yeah.
our kids comfortable, or we want them to feel good by the end of the practice. And again, when you're
Yep.
looking at game situations, there's nothing predictable about it. I tend to say
Yeah.
it's chaos. As soon as the game
Yeah.
starts, it's just chaos. So how do we survive the chaos?
Yeah.
And how do we as coaches actually create this environment to get us
Yeah.
ready to perform?
So a couple ways that we can think about this. So one is I actually think that this is more simple concept than people realize. So,
Mhm.
like, if I was talking to my grandma and I was like, hey, I have to give a TED talk in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm trying to think about the best way to prepare for that. And so I could go, well, I could just like type out my whole talk and have it on paper and just recite it a bunch of times alone in front of a mirror. And
Hmm.
I could just do that over and over and over and over and over all day.
Right.
Or do you think I should maybe do that a couple times, but once I get the hang of it, maybe I should do fewer reps, but do them in front of people?
Right.
And my grandma, who's like 85, would be like, you should probably do the second one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, because
Yeah.
it's like, okay, you think about what do I have to do in the TED talk? I have to give a talk with no notes in front of people. And I don't get to do it like 20 times and then they record the 21st. It's like one shot, no notes, audience.
Right.
So let's work backwards from that and go, how can I incorporate some of those variables into my practice so I'm actually practicing the thing that I'm preparing for?
Right.
And so
Exactly.
again, this seems simple and obvious, but like we have to remember these points and then take it back to sports and practice. So we want to practice the actual thing we're preparing for. Just being able to read a speech off of printed out, like on a printed out piece of paper doing it 50 times in a row isn't even the same skill of the actual TED Talk with no notes in front of a live audience, one shot. So I tell people, one, you want to practice the actual skill in the way that you intend to use it. And a
Right.
lot of us go wrong there. Another thing to keep in mind, or another idea to understand when we're thinking about creating a better practice environment, there's a difference between learning and performance. So there's scientific terms for this, but this is how I like to think about it. What you see in practice, in a practice session, is sort of um, practice performance. It's like we do this drill. My players are better at this drill. It's looking good. They're making more shots. So this is what I observe during the training or study or practice session. Learning is what happens tomorrow and what happens in the game. Like that's the real thing that we want.
Right.
The problem is when you get into some of this research, you see sort of the trap, which is usually the things that lead to better practice performance lead to worse long-term learning.
Yeah.
And the things that hurt practice performance and make it a little uglier and messier, more difficult, actually improve long-term learning. So that's exactly what we just established with our TED Talk example.
Yeah.
Reading it off the notes looks good, feels good. I don't make very many mistakes. It's not that uncomfortable to be alone in front of my mirror, just reciting my speech off my notes.
Yeah.
And doing the practice in front of friends and family with no notes is more uncomfortable. There's going to be more uncertainty, more struggle, but that's better for the real TED Talk. And so we have to kind of separate these two things out and understand that there is a difference between what we see in practice, that practice performance, and long-term learning. When we're talking sports, and I don't care what the sport is, we should be chasing learning. Like that's what we want. We want the progress that we see in practice to actually show up on Friday night when the lights are on and there's a scoreboard. And so a lot of the research that I dig into and a lot of the things I talk about, that's what we're trying to do, which is how do you create a practice environment where the progress we're making transfers to the next day or the actual game?
Right. Yeah, and as you're talking, man, I know we have a mutual friend in CC Craft, and
Yeah.
CC, she taught me this concept. A lot of times we teach junk food confidence, right? We make
Yeah.
the drill, we
Yeah.
make the drills simple, or
Yeah.
think about basketball with your basketball background. You see the kids, they go on the shooting gun, they take 10 shots in the corner, 10 shots at the top of the key, 10 shots on the wing. And you
Hmm.
see the kids, they feel good. They feel confident about
Yeah.
their ability.
Yeah.
But in a game situation, that's never going to show up. So she talks about, well, we have to give them that healthy food. And
Yeah.
healthy food doesn't taste good in the moment, right? But we know
Nope.
we
Yeah.
have that long-term benefit. And so
Yeah.
just again, looking at our environment, are we giving them that junk food? Are we giving
Yeah.
them that healthy food? I know you talk about in a lot of your conversations, you talk about this concept of zoo tiger versus jungle tiger.
Hmm.
So could you explain to our
Yeah.
listeners real quick that concept as far as the difference between a jungle tiger and a zoo tiger?
Yeah. So I love that you talked to Cece. She is unbelievably great. She's like one
Yes.
of my favorite learning people. And that idea of junk food confidence, it is really powerful. And honestly, that's a barrier. And that's a big reason that maybe more coaches don't apply this science because we feel like we're like, well, if we make the practice more difficult or more like a game, it's going to hurt the confidence of my players.
Right.
But it's like, well, I think honestly, if you actually laid it out and explained all this to the players, it's like I will feel more confident if I prepared in the right way.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
if you go back to the stupid TED example, it's like, okay, yes, one of the strategies is easier and technically like maybe I feel good in the moment. But if you laid it out, it's like, no, I'm going to feel more confident and more prepared if I have some high quality reps under my belt. So
Yeah.
that's like a true source of confidence, not the junk food confidence, which is like that fake performance, that like the things that you do in the moment just to feel good and look good that we think that we need, but we actually don't. So yeah, CC is awesome. I love that idea a lot. We talk about it a lot. So let's go to the Tigers.
Yeah.
And this is just another way of kind of thinking about some of the things we've already touched on, but metaphors are really good.
Yeah.
Metaphors are good because people can understand them and remember them. And like, again, that's what we want.
Yeah. Exactly.
So like, there's different versions of this, some short, some long, but we'll do the short one, which is if you had two tigers and one of those tigers lived in a zoo and one of them lived in a jungle, obviously their environment and life couldn't be more different. So zoo tiger, easy, comfortable, predictable, always has food, water, shelter. That tiger is not going to struggle because it doesn't experience anything that would lead to struggle.
Yeah.
Like problems or change, those things don't happen in the cage in the zoo. There are no problems to solve.
Yeah.
There's no change. Jungle tiger, obviously different scenario. It finds its food, water, and shelter on its own. And then every day is different and unpredictable. And it's kind of forced to solve problems and deal with change every single day. So that environment obviously is more difficult than the zoo. Okay. You could ask this question to anyone, but which one of those tigers is going to learn more stuff? Well, the jungle tiger would.
Yeah.
There would
Yeah.
be a giant gap between the tigers if you're talking about development. The proof of that would be, okay, what would happen if you took a tiger that spent its whole life in the zoo and then you threw it out into the jungle? It's screwed
Yeah.
because it doesn't know how to deal with the change, the uncertainty, the chaos. It doesn't know how to find food because it's never had to do that. Great. This is a metaphor for comfort zones. So if you take that metaphor and flip it to learning, an ironclad rule of learning says if we're trying to grow, whether it's a muscle or a skill, we have to stretch and challenge in order to achieve growth.
Yeah.
Okay. What we're saying is, yes, comfort zones come in all shapes and sizes. Depending on what we do, depending on who we are, our comfort zone is going to look different. But the argument is, if we spend all of our time in our comfort zone, it is easy there. We look good there. We don't struggle very much there. Our comfort zone is a lot like the zoo.
Mhm.
And so if we do only those things, just like the zoo tiger, we sort of limit our growth. So in a big way, what we're saying is we are built to learn like the jungle tiger when we stretch a little out of the comfort zone and have to struggle and we have to deal with some uncertainty, have to deal with some chaos. Now, couple things to play off of this metaphor. One, tigers don't have a choice in the matter, but we do.
Yeah.
That's the best part here. So a tiger is in the zoo, in the jungle, that never, ever, ever changes. Everyone listening to this and everyone that we lead and work with, we get to make this choice like multiple times a day. Anytime we choose to do the right thing or better thing over the easy, comfortable option, we are in the jungle.
Yeah.
So that's as small as like, hey, if you have a question in class and you ask it, that's a jungle tiger. Because
Yeah.
it's more difficult to ask that question than to not ask the question. Playing one-on-one against someone who's a little bit better than you, that's being a jungle tiger.
Yeah.
Because of course it would be easier to play someone you know you can beat every time. So this isn't about a rally cry trying to get people to be like reckless and bold or aggressive. That's not what the tiger metaphor is about. It's more like helping people understand that there's moments each and every day where we can make this small choice to like stretch a little out of that comfort zone.
Yeah.
And it's in those moments that we really grow the best. And so I think the metaphor does a good job of explaining the value of spending a bit more time out of the comfort zone because, again, it's uncomfortable there, but that's also where we grow the best. Now we take that metaphor and we attach it back to everything that we just talked about.
Yeah.
The problem with a lot of coaches, and this isn't just at the high school or middle school level, like you see this in the like pro sports coaches do this
Right.
too,
Yeah.
which is Monday through Thursday, we sort of practice in the zoo.
Yeah.
It's structured, it's predictable, it looks good. We're creating that junk food confidence. But then the problem is, and you nailed it just a couple minutes ago, whatever sport we're talking about, for the most part, the game is like the jungle. No two games are alike. No two plays are alike. It's like there's so much unpredictability in the actual competition. There's more pressure because there's a scoreboard and fans, but just the uncertainty of the like even a play in a game is just off the charts.
Yeah.
And so essentially what we do is we practice for 4 days a week in the zoo. Then on Friday night, we throw our players into the jungle and then we wonder why they're not doing the things that we thought we could do. It's, well, the reason why is we've spent 4 days in the zoo. And again, we're not practicing the real skill, which is decision making and dealing with pressure and being able to solve problems on the fly and dealing with uncertainty. All those are skills that can be built, but you can't get good at the skills if you're never practicing them.
Right. And as I hear you talk, Trevor, like my mind's going everywhere because again, you always teach me things in a simple way, right? So as I hear you talk, of course, as coaches, we want to push our kids out of their comfort zone. We want
Hmm.
to put them in the best environment, right? But
Hmm.
I think where we struggle sometimes as coaches, I always look at coaches as teachers. And how
Yep.
can we become better teachers? And how do we actually
It's good.
within our environment where we're making it uncomfortable, we're putting them now in the jungle. How
Hmm.
do we become better teachers, right? And
Yes.
understanding how people learn and how to get out of
Yep.
your concept of, I know you talk a lot about autopilot, and
Yep.
I heard a great conversation with John Kessel. And I know you're big on USA volleyball and you know John well. And John says, like, hey, this isn't just an athletic competition, guys. This is a
Yep.
learning competition. So
Yep.
how can you help us as teachers?
Yep.
Because again, for me, I see coaching as teaching, and that is
Yep.
part of the environment we create.
100%. So this honestly was a big turning point in my business. So you kind of asked me this at the start and and the way you framed that question just kind of reminded me of this. So I think yes, there's a lot of good research that supports everything that we've said so far about creating a bit more difficulty in practice.
Yeah,
And again, we're not saying throw people into the deep end and hope for the best.
yeah,
Like, of course, there's ways to make practice too difficult and create too much struggle. We want that sweet spot. Just like if we're exercising, like you're not going to load up my bench press with like 400 pounds and be like, yep, you're struggling. That's
yeah,
going to help you grow. It's like, no,
yeah,
there's like that right amount of weight that induces like the right amount of struggle. And same rules apply to everything that we've talked about. But the issue is we can create a really, really good science-backed practice that involves the desirable difficulties, that involves some variation, that mimics the jungle, like everything that we talked about.
yeah,
But I think where people go wrong is we should spend more time, one, explaining this to our athletes. I've seen this in person a lot. When we were doing these basketball camps, the first year, I didn't do that. I would just take the science, build a great practice, and then hope for the best. Year two, the experiment we ran is I tried to teach a lot of this science to the players. So then they see, look, I am making this practice more difficult, not to just be a pain in your butt. It's like, no, we're making this difficult because it's better for you. And
Right.
when you teach them the science, they're like, oh, I get what you're doing now. It's, oh, you, you made these adjustments to the rules, or you make me play better teams. You do all these things because I'm now in the jungle. And so when they understand like the why underneath this, they're going to be more engaged in doing it versus the alternative, which is like, yeah, I just do this and then throw them out there.
Right.
So again, that's part of being a teacher, which is like explaining what's underneath this and like why you're doing the actual thing.
Yeah.
And from my experience, the players are actually really interested in this. Like, it's cool. It's, hey, you're teaching me how to like learn better and faster in practice, which makes me a better player. Yes, tell
Yeah.
me more.
Yeah.
Then the other side is, and it kind of brings us back to some of these other topics, which is we also have to like help our athletes develop a better mindset towards learning in general.
Yeah.
So like if they don't believe they can change or they're not willing to feel uncomfortable, sure, my practice on paper is scientifically good, but if my players aren't right between their ears, they're not going to get the most out of that practice. And so again, it kind of goes back to that equation of
Yeah.
great, make a good practice, create that environment, but then you also have to invest in the mindset piece as well. So it's always going to go back to that. Like they work together. They're not just two kind of like isolated things.
Yeah. So let's dive into that part. I think Trevor is the mindset. So we started the equation mindset plus environment equals behavior,
Yep.
right? We dove into environment first, but
Yep.
you just triggered it. I mean, I can't have a call with you without talking about growth mindset. I know this is like your jam. You've done so much research on it. So again,
Hmm.
we can create all these environments, right? But it comes
Yep.
back to our kids and our student athletes. It comes back to their belief in their
Yep.
ability to learn, right? And
Yep.
I would love for you to spend a few minutes on the new research that you found out about growth mindset and
Yep.
understanding like a lot of times we get it wrong between growth mindset and fixed mindset. We just tell kids like, hey, just go have a growth mindset. It's going to help
Yeah.
you. It's going to make
Yeah.
you more challenges and seek feedback and all that stuff. We show them the
Yeah.
chart. Like, here's the differences. But talk to us about your new research, how you approach it now, and actually how you deliver your content on this whole idea around growth mindset.
Yeah. So this is good. I think probably most people at this point, when they hear growth mindset, are like, oh, I already know that.
Yeah.
And that's true. It's been a popular topic, but there's also like updates coming out on the research all the time. And so I think between the new research and then just spending the last 12 years thinking about this topic, I think I'm in a pretty good spot of where people typically go wrong and where we should probably spend a bit more time. So,
Right.
one is I do not think growth mindset is overrated. I think it's actually essential, but again, we have to explain it properly. So, high level, you nailed it. Growth mindset is simple. It's the belief that we can learn and change and grow.
Yeah.
Obviously, we need that. Like,
100%.
again, so it's like, if I don't believe I can change, why would I ever actually try? I wouldn't. And so it's sort of this like layer one of becoming a better learner is developing this mindset of, I believe I can learn. Now, most people usually kind of live on this surface level, which is explaining what a growth mindset is and then showing why it's important. Well, it's important because it helps us learn. But then we just stop where you kind of how you mentioned, which is like, all right, so you should have a growth mindset.
Right. Yeah.
And so I challenge people to go beyond the definition and go, and for all the stuff that we've talked about today, and pretty much everything I talk about, I just like to work backwards.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, the belief we're trying to build is I believe I could grow. Okay. Well, what are some things that we could do that can reinforce that belief? So again, we can't just say, here's the behavior, do it. It's we have to go deeper. What are some things you could do to reinforce it? And I think there's a lot of things, but some of the most effective and you've seen me do a few of these. Well, one is like simply allowing people to take a step back and acknowledge and see all the skills that they've been building their whole life.
Yeah.
So many times we work with people who like display a strong fixed mindset. They're like, I can't change, I can't learn. But they are sitting on top of a mountain of skills that they've been building their whole life, because that's true for every human. Every human, doesn't matter how old we are or what we do, we've been learning and changing and growing our whole entire life. Like everything we do in life is supported by skills we've been learning. So we are all capable of learning because we're literally doing it all the time. We just sometimes don't recognize it and see it.
Right.
So I love short conversations with people, which is like, hey, tell me about something you're good at. How did you get good at that thing? It's sort of a reminder of like, yeah, even if it's something stupid like a game on my phone, I am better now than I was 2 months ago. Why? Because I'm practicing, like I'm changing, I am
Yeah.
learning that thing. And so it seems kind of basic, but a fantastic way of reinforcing a growth mindset is sort of providing evidence through reflection. It's like, hey, look at all the stuff you're learning. And that can help kind of build this belief of like, oh, I believe I can learn stuff because I have learned stuff. Um, Another good strategy is taking people through the learning process, kind of allowing them to learn something new and then using that as evidence that they can change. So it's like, okay, let's all go learn to juggle or learn a small skill that can happen in a few days. Again, that seems basic, but you're again providing evidence. You're not just saying you can grow, you're proving it to people that they can grow. As leaders, this is something that we can do of just like watching the people we lead, and when they're making progress, shine a light on that. Because again, sometimes as the individual, we're so in the weeds that we don't see the progress we're making. And a leader can point out, like, hey, last week you couldn't even do this move or this thing, and now you kind of can. And so you're pointing out progress, and then that can create some momentum around learning. Again, I believe I can grow because I am growing right now.
Right.
So that's a good strategy too. And then you can kind of go the science angle and talk about the neuroplasticity research, which is basically saying
Yeah.
if you have a brain, you have a learning machine between your ears. Like
Yeah.
one of the main functions of the brain is to learn. And if we actually give it time to do its job, we'll all be surprised that that capacity to learn is greater than we know. And so I like all those strategies. There's other things you could do, but the North Star and what we're chasing is we want people to develop like a strong belief in their capacity to learn. And I think those strategies are a good way to do that. And then it's something that can be reinforced over time. But my favorite thing about it is the momentum that you can pick up. So it's like, I believe I can learn stuff. I spend more time trying to learn stuff. I learn more stuff. And therefore, I believe more that I can learn. So it's like
Yeah.
this can really start to snowball once you get the ball rolling, which is really cool.
Yeah, and just hearing you talk, I love how you connect everything back. I mean, again, it comes back to that old equation, understanding where our mindset is at. And I know you talk a lot about it's not just a mindset, it's a mind state. So it's always
Yeah.
changing, right? And so
Yeah.
we have to
Yeah.
recognize what our mind state is. Again, we
Yep.
look at our environment and then we are able to slowly but surely change the behavior. So the last thing as we wrap up, because we're kind of short on time, but I wanted to talk about this whole idea. I always say to coaches, I always say to leaders, it's not about us, but it starts with us. So as
Yeah.
leaders, how do we model all of this stuff for our student?
Yeah. That's such a good place to end this because so many times when I work with leaders, they want hey, what should I just tell my athletes? So it's like sort of like they are in the middle of this equation of I'm giving them content and then they simply just tell it to their people.
Yeah.
And what I challenge leaders to do is pause and understand that for almost every single thing that we've talked about together today, the best way of creating this environment and teaching this stuff to people is to walk the walk and model the behaviors yourself. So it's like, hey, if you want the people in your environment to jungle tiger more, you should be jungle tigering more. And there's some science that supports it, but this is all really human nature, which is if you have a room of humans and one person takes a small risk, like even just raising their hand and asking a question. And I know you've seen this before.
Yep.
One person in the room asks a question, a bunch more people will ask a question.
Yep.
And I know that that's a small example, but that's this. So it's like one person being vulnerable and raising their hand and doing this small learning action creates an environment where it's safer for more people to raise their hand and do the same thing. My favorite example of that ever is there's some schools that I work with, some middle schools that do this thing called the anti-talent show. And this is their way of teaching growth mindset. So kind of like we said a few minutes ago, instead of just telling the students to have a growth mindset,
Yeah.
they set up the anti-talent show, which is, okay, everyone pick something that you can't do. You get to practice it for 2 weeks. We hold the anti-talent show and they have the teachers and students do it. Love it. So I visit one of the schools after they do the project, and I'm sitting in a room with a bunch of the seventh graders, and I asked them like, "Hey, like, what was your favorite part?" One of the kids raised her hand, and she goes, "The best part is that I got to see my teacher struggle, and that helped me understand it's okay for me to struggle too."
Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah.
And so this example of modeling goes deeper than people typically think when we bring up this word of modeling. Sometimes, especially in sports, we think of modeling as showing our athletes how to do a thing.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a form of modeling. But this is deeper. This is the teacher was learning a different skill than the student. So it wasn't just the teacher showing the student how to skateboard. The teacher was modeling the learning process itself. So the willingness to try something new and to struggle, and even how she responds to the struggle.
Mhm.
By putting those actions on display, she creates a safer environment for the students in the room
Yep.
to also engage in those learning behaviors. And then again, we see a snowballing effect. So the question you asked was like, how do we do this? It's not rocket science. It's basically, again, working backwards and going, what are the actions and behaviors that I want to see more of from the people I lead? How can I put some of these actions on display as a leader? So if I want my people like asking lots of questions, I should be asking lots of questions. If I want my people to ask for feedback more often, I should be asking for feedback more often.
Yep.
And again, this is all human nature, but if I'm your coach and I'm constantly asking you like, "Hey, how could I be better? Do you have some feedback for me?" It's now a lot safer for you to ask me for feedback
Yep.
someday. And
Yep.
so, like I said, this isn't that complicated, but it is one of the best ways that we can really start to build a better learning environment. Just walking that walk and putting these actions on display.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that is probably the perfect way to end this conversation, Trevor. Because again, this is something like all within our control, right? This
Yeah.
whole concept of what is the mindset? What is the environment we are creating?
Hmm.
And that's going to
Hmm.
lead to the behaviors. And that's always my
Yep.
biggest thing as a coach, as a leader, is like you said, it starts with us, right? What are we
Yep.
modeling? What are our expectations? What are we tolerating? All those things
Hmm.
come into play. And when we do those things, it comes back
Yep.
to kind of like your slogan, man. We're trying to get better at getting better. we have the
100%.
opportunity to create the best environment and best experience for our kids. So
Yep.
I can't thank you enough for this conversation, man. But tell our listeners, like, where can they look you up? What are some
Yep.
things you are working on? You have the great free audiobook on your website. So tell your
Mm-hmm.
listeners where they can find you if they want to connect a little further.
Yeah. Just go to thelearnerlab.com and all my best stuff is there. So videos, podcasts, articles. We have a bunch of new videos coming out soon. Um, there's a really good one we just published about like how to deal with stress and discomfort when you're learning. And I think people would really like it. And it's kind of the perfect complement to everything we talked about. They'll see kind of how it relates to this conversation. So thanks for having me on. This was really, really fun.
Hey, man, I appreciate you again. Like I said at the beginning, like when I was making a list of guests, you were on top of the list, man, because you have made
Awesome.
me better these past 4 years. So I can't thank you enough. We appreciate you being on the Being Champions podcast.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.